So it's not very often that the team at the UK Academy of Wedding and Event Planning get a chance to get together. We, as a virtual campus, all work at different places, different locations. So it was quite exciting to know that I was actually going to get to spend some time with Zoe, who's our course consultant here at the UK Academy, today, here down at the Blog Awards, or Wedding Blog Awards at the Savoy Hotel. But Zoe isn't just a course consultant for us. She also runs her own successful wedding planning business called Cherish Wedding Planning in Cambridge. So I thought it would be really fun if I took this opportunity to talk to Zoe a little bit more about what you do with a client that comes to you with an idea that's unique, maybe slightly different and unusual to what you're used to doing. So not the standard wedding, but something that's got a little bit of an edge to it, something that's got a theme that might not be your run-of-the-mill theme. And it just so happened that when I passed the idea through Zoe, she said she'd had a client come to her with a very unusual wedding theme, which is the perfect choice for us to talk about today. So Zoe,
hi.
Tell me more about this client.
So yeah, the client that came to me, I didn't know initially, so we went on the first consultation and she said, oh, we're looking for something, the venue. They hadn't found the venue.
Okay.
And then so, okay, let's try and find the venue. And they had a mix of things that they wanted. So they wanted trains to be involved, had to be trains.
Trains.
They were both really into trains and they wanted trains to be involved. They wanted an industrial feel, a very modern feel. So already that's, because they weren't into
very
modern.
edgy.
Yeah, it was the train combination and modern, not necessarily together. And then they were really into graffiti. So they wanted the three things, which actually is a fine mix now, I know, but in the beginning was like, oh, you want all these combinations of things. And I need to find them in a venue. So, and I didn't know them very well, so we started to do the search. There were a few places in London, but they were old. So they were a bit scruffy, a bit shabby, train and graffiti, but they wanted something with a bit more wow and quite modern and
industrial looking.
Yeah, and unusual.
That feel.
So that's where we started, and in the end, they'd already found the perfect place. They just didn't really think it was right for them because they were based in Cambridge. So they'd already found the Roundhouse in Derby, which is a big roundhouse where the trains, you know, would have been, and that's been turned into, I think it's part of Derby College. That's been turned into a venue. So the train line comes in right there. So they had some opportunities for the train.
Photos.
And then the venue was exactly what they wanted. But they sort of discounted it because it was in Derby and they wanted something local. And in the end, they just realised that it was the perfect venue. So just ship everybody up to Derby, which is what we did, and then add the graffiti element to the
So how do you go about adding a graffiti element to a wedding? I mean, I'm assuming that because you've not done anything like this before, there's going to be a certain amount of research involved. So from a student's perspective, if they've never come up against this type of thing before, what would be the first thing that you do when somebody comes along with an unusual theme like that, where you've never done it before and you're having to source something that's completely different to what you normally do? Where do you start?
Yeah.
What's the
so
thought
I needed
process?
to find out a bit more about it from them. And also, they both liked to do graffiti themselves. So it wasn't just that they had a love of graffiti, it sort of
They're
worked
graffiti
out
artists
that,
as
yeah,
well.
they both liked doing it. So it was then, how can we involve and put your touches into the wedding? So we kind of started with the wider thing of the wedding. So just went with, you know, booking the photographer, doing all the normal things first. I say normal, but
Get
you know,
that out
going
the way.
through all the suppliers
Yeah.
with an eye to the fact that this wasn't an ordinary wedding. So when we chose, I put a selection of photographers to them. I wasn't going with a run-of-the-mill. These were people that were, and in the end they chose somebody that won Wedding Photographer of the year before, and he was very edgy, and they loved his pictures.
Yeah,
and
something a little bit more quirky.
Yeah, and that's what they went with. And he was from Manchester or something. He wasn't, you know, there was no connection. I'd never met him, they'd never met him. We'd just done our research
But you researched this?
Yeah, I researched it and put together, I think 8 actually for them in the beginning. 8
so were
photographers.
Any of those 8 photographers that you would have worked with before?
Yeah, a couple of them were people I knew locally who I said, you know, I think they would work for you, with you. And then some who I knew who weren't local, but that I'd worked with on wedding. And then just some new in there because they were really just, I thought, an exact match. It happened actually that they booked one who they loved, and then about 4 months later, he cancelled. And so we had to start the
usual
whole thing
process
again. He was lovely, and we thought, you know, and they'd pay their deposit and everything. And he was like, but a family friend, and so I'm going to ditch you for it. It was all one of those things that doesn't happen very often.
Nightmare scenario.
Yeah, but anyway, so we started again and found this great photographer. On we went
so
again.
Even
so we
your
just
actual,
booked those.
Well, your normal suppliers.
We had to just
you've
be
still
sure.
gone outside the box and outside the realm of what you normally do.
You need enough information in the beginning, because when you book a florist, there is no point in booking a very traditional florist who cannot have the vision
really.
to come up with something creative. You know, they wanted something very modern, and they'd got quite a few ideas, and they couldn't pin it down to anything in the beginning. But you know, you've got to get that florist booked.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of and I started working with them about 18 months before the wedding, so quite a long time out. We had a long time out, but they wanted nice suppliers. They wanted the best. They've got some very clear ideas, even though they didn't know what they wanted. They weren't going to be, oh, just book me something. They weren't happy with that. You know, some people are
they
like,
had very set ideas on what they were looking for, even though it was different.
It took some research. And even though we didn't have a specific, when we went to the florist, we didn't have a specific design that we wanted.
It was more about working together.
They knew they wanted light in the arrangement somewhere.
Okay.
They wanted something really bold and lots of use of colour, and something that they could input their graffiti. But they wanted the florist to have that input with them as well.
So it was really a collaboration between everyone.
So it had to work with the personalities. We saw a few, found one.
And that's a key point
similar.
there.
Yeah.
It's about choosing, as a wedding planner, it's about choosing suppliers that are right for your client and not necessarily suppliers that are right for you. So that's a very key point.
Because students often say to me, oh, I've got lots of connections with suppliers, or do you go and shall I spend the next few months making connections with suppliers? Well, you can, but only if they're going to help you to grow your business. Don't worry too much about finding lots of connections with suppliers for your couples that you're going to work with, because that will come, that will evolve. If the connections with suppliers are going to help you grow your business, great.
Yeah.
But don't just go out there meeting loads of people and spending time on that, because, you know, like Derby, the Roundhouse, they'd got certain suppliers they like to work with and certain connections, and we checked those out as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be people that I'd known or I'd heard of or I've worked with before. With each wedding, I grow another collection of people.
Yeah.
I have never done the same selection of suppliers for a
you
wedding.
do often have core people that you turn to.
Definitely.
But the point here is that with an event like this, as you say, you know, the whole floristry process needed to be a collaboration between the bride and groom, the florist, yourself. So taking it back to that for a second, how did they incorporate the graffiti element into the floral design?
So they had vases that were internally lit with coloured water, and they had lights inside that, and then they had like a scrunched up fabric. They had some flowers on the top, like pom-poms, and then they had like a card or a paper sprayed design thing sticking out of the top. And they were really tall cylinders on each table, different coloured. So the overall colour theme was like a really citrusy green and pink with black.
Wow, vibrant.
So they were pink, green, pink, green, pink, green, and then these splashes of black. And then as we got closer to the wedding, they went up there for a wedding fair and found this designer who literally, it was her first wedding fair. She'd never done a wedding before. She was great. She didn't say that. She'd got some ideas, and she was just starting out in business. And they said, "Oh, we really like her. We like her ideas. We're going to add some of that, Zoe.
Yeah.
She can help us put that graffiti in," which is great because I'm a planner. I could give them ideas and I can source things for them.
But
and
ultimately, you're
I
not a designer.
No, and I can book it and I can look after the budget and I can make sure everyone arrives and everybody knows what they're doing and do all the coordination. But I am not going to be, you know, spray painting stuff for them on the morning of the wedding, or, you know, I'm happy to help lay the tables and check everything's right, but I'm not going to make things. And they needed, for their theme, I wasn't going to be able to go and buy off the peg graffiti things to match their colour scheme. They're very strong on their colours. And for some weddings you can source off the internet and you can buy a job lot of something and tweak it. But not for a more
unique wedding like this. So what other elements did you bring in to represent that graffiti theme?
So once we had the designer, that helped. So they had the pom-poms sprayed, graffiti sprayed with lines that hung from the ceiling with drapes in the different colours of the ribbon. The venue helped a lot. So you have to go with the venue a bit as well,
Of course,
with your design.
absolutely.
This lovely roundhouse. You know, it wouldn't have worked. The graffiti wedding wouldn't work at the Savoy.
No, of course
You know.
not, because again, as you say, you really have to take into consideration the actual style of your venue.
Yeah, and then it just, once we'd got the colours and the design and the graffiti, then it went through everything, through the stationery. We had a particular font that wasn't a run-of-the-mill font that they used, the colours, the printing, the way they'd written it, the effect on all of the stationery, everything that was printed.
Did they do any of the design themselves?
We got that.
Being
Yeah,
artists?
they were really involved in that, and they did tweak it. And they had a sister who also was a website designer, I think, and she helped them get the colours right and things like that. So we did go back and forth a little bit with some proofreading and things like that, because it was quite hard to read some of the graffiti writing. But it was really lovely, and that went right from day one with the invites. So we got that.
So the theme
started
followed all the way through.
Yeah.
And so by the end of that, I mean, obviously this is quite a unique brief to be given, a wedding where they want trains, they want graffiti. It's, you know, it's like
wedding. So let's start on the cake. What do you want for the cake? A monster. So she literally,
so another element being added.
had, because they were a little bit gothic, she literally had a monster, an enormous monster that was, the head was over the top of the cake, like a 3-tier cake with this monster grabbing the cake.
Right.
Really, and that was a bit love-hate. You know, some of the guests were like, ooh, and others were like, nah, not really. And she had it on a turntable, so the back of the cake, you couldn't see it. The back of the cake had their name, and we'd put some words, and they'd done like that.
Yeah.
And then, the cake lady, then it was on a turntable, so we turned it, so then the monster arrived later on.
Right.
Which was nice for cutting of the cake, which was good fun. And they wanted that, and that was their personality. And I think they'd taken the idea from a cake topper. They sent me a picture of a cake topper and said, we like this. And then I worked with the cake lady, and we went back and forth with design.
So there is still an element to being a wedding planner, isn't there, where you do get involved in that design process. As you just said, they sent you a cake topper, and then you liaised with the cake designer as to how that was going to be incorporated and what happened. And that's something you've got to be prepared to do as a wedding planner. And
because
really
they have that dream,
help.
and you want to make that dream happen, but you know there are restrictions.
Yeah.
You know.
So you've got to be the voice of reason, you've got to be the go-between, you've got to be prepared to liaise between the client and the supplier. And in this case, it is something very unusual. But again, it's all about finding the right people that will work with your clients.
And they had loads of ideas, and that's the other great thing about a combination of somebody that really wants to be involved in their wedding and a wedding planner. For me, is the best.
Yeah, so it was the ideal scenario.
Because they were full of ideas, which was great, and they knew what they wanted, which again is great. But they wanted to be creative and let me do the planning.
Yeah.
And that's what my job is. So that was perfect for me, because they still had an enormous input into their wedding and personalised it, and everything was, you know, everybody would have arrived and would have thought, wow, this is, you know, this is their day.
Yeah.
But just left me to get on with all the behind the scenes stuff, the back and forth of the emails.
Which doesn't always happen, does it?
No, I think often people think as a wedding planner that you will take over.
And that's certainly not the case at all.
No, just have your wedding, throw your ideas, do let your personality take over, do say exactly what you want, make it your wedding, and then I'll just make it happen if I can.
And that's exactly what seems to have happened here.
Yeah, it was really lovely, and it was really special when it came together and see all those colours and the vibrancy. It wouldn't have been everybody's choice, but that's what's so nice about
personal style. But at the end of the day, was it anything like what you had imagined it to be? When the brief came in, you did mention that you thought it was a bit of a strange combination, but as it happened, it worked. No,
it's always better. I've never been disappointed. You know, when you go on the day and it comes together, it's always like, oh yeah, this is good. And I always say, if you love it and you like it, let's not worry about whether it goes together yet. You know, in the beginning, they are throwing ideas out.
Literally, yeah.
And they're very worried about, will that work together? Will that be okay? And it just, if it's things you love and you really like them, then let's just go with all of those to begin with.
And then
because if you
funnel
love it, it'll be fine.
Later.
It's your day.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's a combination of the old, the new, the shabby, the modern, if you love those pieces and we choose them, they will come together.
It will work because it will reflect the couple's personality.
Yeah.
Well, Zoe, that really does sound like the wedding to end all weddings. I'm sure you've never had another one quite like that.
No.
But
Monster they're all
cakes,
different, aren't
trains,
they? You know,
graffiti.
they're all unique. They're all different.
They are.
You know,
They
that's what's so
certainly
great
are.
about the job. The next one comes along, even though it might not be something as unusual, it will be different again.
It will
every
be,
single one.
of course. Now, as you can see, Zoe is an extremely talented and established wedding planner, and she also happens to be one of our tutors as well. So if you do become a student with the Academy, you may be lucky enough to have Zoe as your tutor, and she can impart yet more of her pearls of wisdom to you. So thank you for watching. I hope you've learned a little bit more about what it's like to take a unique and slightly more unusual brief and turn it into the client's vision and turn that vision into a reality. You've been watching Kylie and Zoe. We've had a great time. We're here for the Blog Awards, and yeah, we'll see you next time.